I've long maintained that the SJW boogeyman has been a scare tactic propped up by so-called free speech crusaders on the right for nothing more than views and clicks. But at the same time, even though I think that the SJW hysteria we often hear about is overblown, I've never been inclined to say that SJWs, generally speaking, aren't a problem, because I do think that free speech is important and language policing is not a way that we should be moving forward as the left. I think it's problematic. Now, with that being said, there's also right-wing SJWs that are problematic. However, there was a video published by Now This that encouraged people to stop using a specific word because it's racist, and I think that this is really one of the main examples that demonstrates why SJWs are still a problem, even if they may not be as big as a problem as people like Dave Rubin want us to believe.
Stop saying marijuana. Why? Because it's racist as The term was used to knock on people of color and their devilish ways. Now, the word itself isn't inherently racist, but it was used by American prohibitionists to exploit racism and xenophobia. So by using the M word, you're ignoring a long history of oppression against Mexican immigrants and African Americans. Let's go on a quick history lesson, shall we? Weed has been consumed by the American elite since the 1840s. It was even sold over the counter as medication to treat insomnia, migraines, and rheumatism. But it didn't become controversial until the early 1900s, when millions of Mexicans migrated to the US following the Mexican Revolution. With them, they brought marijuana, and their customs of smoking it casually and regularly. But the term was then popularized in the 1930s by this man. Harry Anslinger was the director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics from 1930 to 1962. Now, Anslinger believed that marijuana influenced black and brown people to commit murder and other violent crimes, which is ridiculous, because all I see people do when they smoke is sit on their couch, watch TV, eat munchies, and fall asleep. So his solution was to launch a vicious propaganda campaign against marijuana and associate it with all inferior races and social deviants. Anslinger traveled across the country to convince people that marijuana was something that was invading the US. He even pronounced the drug as marijuana to make it sound Hispanic and foreign and scary to white people. The campaign played on through 1937, when Anslinger successfully pushed Congress to pass the Marijuana Tax Act, which made the drug illegal at a federal level. Since then, marijuana has been associated with the notion of addiction or living a lesser life. Instead of a herbal medicine that seems to help people with several health conditions, or simply as a way to just relax after a long, hard day's work. You might argue that marijuana lost its prejudice bite years ago, but you can't ignore the racial implications of its introduction to the American lexicon. Besides, nothing has changed. This whole conversation is actually very deja vu. We're still trying to fight the negative stigma that clings onto a plant in 2018, all because of white men such as Jeff Sessions and Steve Alford, who keep making terrible remarks when trying to make marijuana the culprit for crime. Organizations that advocate for legalization, and even some media publishers, including Now This, have stopped using marijuana to describe anything that contains THC or any other cannabinoid. So what's the right word to use? Cannabis. Just call it by its Latin name, and you'll not only be technically correct, but also politically correct.
Okay, so he describes use of the word marijuana as, quote, racist as fuck, because the term was used to knock on people of color for their devilish ways. So by using that word, you're ignoring a history of exploitative ways the word was used to demonize marginalized minorities. Okay, so when I hear his argument, and I tried to be objective as I possibly could be, that was not a persuasive argument. It wasn't. A legitimate argument would be marijuana was used to breed hatred against people of color, but here's the truth. Everyone smokes marijuana, so it should not be stigmatized, and it should be embraced since everyone does it, and we should make sure that people of color aren't locked up more for it than their white peers, even though their white peers smoke marijuana just as much, if not more, than people of color. Now, I'm not just covering this because I disagree with his argument. I'm also covering this because this is an example of how language policing on the left is not only lazy activism, but it's also discrediting the left. If you really care about social justice issues, this is not the way to fight for social justice issues. If you really want to speak out, then you should be fighting to legalize marijuana, not trying to police what people say with regard to language used to refer to cannabis. Now, on a podcast I watched recently with Ethan and Gila Klein, who are generally liberal people but don't really tend to discuss politics too often, they talked about this clip, and in their mind, people on the far right are justified in their obsession of SJWs because this wave of political correctness is ultimately going to lead to the destruction of free speech. And this is what they said about that clip we just watched. Now, keep in mind, these are average people, and this is the impression they get when they hear arguments like that.
Bro, let's roll an M word. Let's roll a... How are you altering our language, you loser?
Hey, don't say
Can
that.
you say the L word, please?
You L word, like that. But that's what they're transforming. Like, we're losing the ability to actually communicate. Like in 1984, this is what Jordan Peterson, he's so afraid of the far left because they're taking away our use of words. They're trying to control how we talk. In 1984, they're editing the language and removing all the expression out of it and boiling it down to as little words as possible. And that's what they're trying to do in a way. We don't have any words left. It's all just going to be L word, M word.
So that, in my view, is how the average person feels when they see videos like this. Not only are you not doing real activism, not only are you language policing, which is harmful, but you are unwittingly propping up anti-SJW creators on the right. You're giving them a platform because you release these types of videos and then they respond to it. And then that makes the aggregate left look bad when in actuality, most people on the left are not trying to police language. We're fighting for real social justice in the form of policy that legalizes marijuana nationwide. We're fighting for social justice so people of color no longer have to worry about getting pulled over or killed by police officers in their community. We're fighting for social justice so that way transgender people can use the bathroom of their choice because we live in a free country. And I'm not talking about this because I want to imply that SJWs are this huge problem that the right makes it out to be. This video is just one video. That individual is not a representative of the left. And the reality is that there's people on the right that are just as easily triggered for other benign things that they shouldn't be offended by. So anytime they feel like their religion, for example, is being made fun of, anytime you mention a transgender person's right to use the bathroom or even fucking exist, they get triggered just as easily as any social justice warrior on a college campus. But to focus on language policing, to create new standards as to what we consider appropriate speech, you are hurting the left and empowering the right. You are having the opposite consequence. I know that you want to help, but you're not helping. This doesn't help at all. This helps no one. 0 people's lives were improved as a result of you telling us not to say marijuana. In fact, I think this hurt people because, again, now right-wingers are going to use this as a reason to discredit the left. It's why people like Jordan Peterson are becoming increasingly popular. People like Ben Shapiro are becoming increasingly popular because even though they'd freak out if you offended their religion, they can use this example to say, look how ridiculous the left is. So stop empowering them, stop trying to police people's language, and actually fight for real social justice if you care about social justice as much as you say you do. It's ridiculous to me.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.